everyone, my name is Jose Arias. I work as a back-end developer at JDK Company. In this video, I will show you how to use code first migration with Entity Framework Core. Also, in this tutorial, we will walk through the process of setting up a code first approach, where we'll start with C# code to define our database models and use migration to create an updated database schema. So, let's get started. To speed up the process, I have created a new Web API project. I am using .NET 8 here, but these steps should be similar for other versions of .NET. First, we'll start by setting up our connection string. Now, we need to install Entity Framework Core package. For this example, I'm going to add Entity Framework Core and Entity Framework Core SQL Server. While the necessary packages for Entity Framework Core are installing, let me quickly explain what we're adding and why. First, we're installing Microsoft.Entity Framework Core, the core library that provides the main feature for working with EF Core. Next is the Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.SQL Server, which is the database provider needed to connect to SQL Server database. Finally, we are adding Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.Design, which is essential for enabling migration and other design time features in EF Core. Next, we'll create our models in separated classes for a clean structure. These models will represent tables in the database. For this example, I'm going to create two classes, student and course. In Entity Framework Core, models are the foundation of the code first approach. Each model represents a table in the database, and the properties of these models map to the table's columns. For example, the student model will include details like ID, name, and enrollment date, while the course model will represent a course details such as ID, title, and credit. These classes help EF Core understand the structure of our data and how it should be stored in the database. Now, let's create a new file. I'm going to call it DbContext. This is a class to act as our DbContext. The repository context class is a custom DbContext that includes two DbSet properties, students and courses. These properties map to the corresponding table in the database. The constructor accepts DbContext option to configure the context, such as specifying the database provider and connection string. Now, I'm going to modify the program class. This line registers this repository context as a service in the dependency injection container. It configures the repository context to use SQL Server as its database provider, using a connection string defined in the application's configuration, in this case in the app.setting.json file. This setup is essential for enabling the application to perform database operation through Entity Framework Core. Now, before our first migration, we need to install Entity Framework Core Tools library, so that allows us to run migration command in the Package Manager console. Now, let's add our first migration, which will create the database schema by executing the add migration command and migration name. And as you can see, we have our first migration. This will create a migration folder with the migration code. What really happened behind is in at migration automate the analysis of model changes and produces a migration class that can modify the database schema to match the current model. This process leverages Entity Framework Core Design Time service to track and apply changes. This file has two methods, up and down. The up method will be executed when apply changes, and the down method will be executed when I remove a migration. If we check on our database, we'll notice the first record in the migration table history. Also, we'll notice that the migration ID is the same file name generator in the migration folder. Now, the next step. Let's set initial data by creating a configuration class for the student. This would add records to the student table. This configuration class is used to set the student table with an initial record when the database is created or migrated. The student entity is configured to have one record with predefined values for ID, name, and enrollment date. Here, we're creating a configuration class for the student model by implementing entity type configuration, student. This approach keeps our model clean and allows us to define additional configuration logic separately. Inside the configuration method, we're using the hashData method to seed initial data for the student table. In this case, we are adding a student named John Doe with an enrollment date of today. This ensures that when we apply migration, our database will already include this predefined data, which is useful for testing or providing default value during development. The onModel creating method is used to apply custom configuration to your entities. In this case, it applies the student configuration to the student entity. This is where you can define configurations such as setting data, setting up relationships and properties. Next, we'll apply the initial city configuration and any pending migration by running update database command that will execute the seed data logic, inserting initial or default data into the database. The seed data is inserted or updated based on your logic. For example, in this case, as a result, we have the seed record in the student table. Finally, if we want to make a SQL script for all the migration, we can do that by executing the script migration command. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more videos. See you the next time.